أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. We've been speaking the last couple of days about misguidance, understanding some of the mechanics behind how misguidance works. We began by speaking about guidance and the three ways in which Allah guides us. Then we spoke about misguidance, and I introduced this idea that Allah, in fact, is a cause of misguidance in a particular sense, and that He takes away tawfiq if we fail to respond to His guidance in the right way. And yesterday we spoke about the relationship between Allah as a cause of misguidance and other causes such as shaitan, such as ignorance, such as desire and dunyawi attraction, these kinds of things. And we recognize that this is a vertical relationship, that shaitan, for instance, is only able to misguide insofar as Allah gives him the ability and the authority to do so. So he's not an independent actor. All of his action and all of the actions of every entity in creation, the action only takes place because of the power that Allah has given for that action to take place. What was left from yesterday's discussion that I want to start with today is the idea of responsibility and culpability. If it's the case, and it is the case, that shaitan acts, the children who are around, if you can just make sure they're with you, if they're your children who are making sounds, make sure they're with you, please. So if it's the case that shaitan is acting and misguiding because of the free will and because of the abilities that Allah has given him, then does that mean that he's not to blame? Is whatever he does, is the misguidance that he causes, is it really just a radiation or an emanation of Allah's misguidance? And is he now free from blame and he's kind of a robot operated by the power of Allah? The same question comes with respect to our actions. Shaitan, we're talking about misguidance, so we're talking about shaitan as an example and how this vertical relationship exists between Allah as the supreme and independent actor and shaitan as a dependent and contingent actor. But the same applies to us. We also have free will. We also have abilities, and of course all those abilities are from Allah. And so if I choose to do good, if I choose to do evil, am I truly responsible for my acts? Or is it Allah, because He's the source of it all? And this has been a debate that's plagued Muslims, especially Muslims who failed to abide by and adhere to the Ahlul Bayt. This was a plague of theological proportions throughout history. And there are those who wanted to or recognized that we have free will. I'm able to choose. I know this intuitively. I don't need to be told that I have free will. I know I have a choice. And that's definite. And Allah has obviously threatened punishment of hellfire. If I'm not culpable, if I'm not blameworthy for my bad deeds, then what's the purpose of hellfire? How would it be just for Allah to force me to do a sin and then punish me for that very sin that He's forced me to do? So I must have responsibility, and if I have responsibility, it must be full agency, full ability, unconstrained by Allah. And so they had this idea that Allah basically creates us, gives us power, delegates it to us, and that's the end of the relationship between us and Allah. Now, if He wants to stop me, if He wants to change my actions, He doesn't have the ability. If He did, then that would be a form of compulsion, and He'd be kind of forcing me and compelling me to do something. The fact that I know I have free will, and the fact that Allah punishes and rewards tells us that Allah can't have any role to play in my deeds according to what they understood. They're known as the Mufawwidha. I translate it as delegationists. They believe that power is delegated to us and Allah no longer has a say in our actions. Na'udhu billah. Another group said that no, this can't be. How can Allah's power be limited? How can He be limited in His ability? He doesn't delegate and give up power. He never relinquishes that. He's all powerful. Ala kulli shay'in qadir. And kulli shay includes not only me as a person, but my actions as well. Those are also things that exist in the world. And so my actions are also under the power of Allah. He makes things happen. And so really all my actions are actually His actions. In the Quran, I read the verse yesterday, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. They took this to mean that your action of fighting is not your action, it's Allah's action. And so they went to the other extreme and said that basically we have no free will. If we have free will, that's somehow challenging God's omnipotence. If Allah is omnipotent, then we can't have free will. And they fell into another another abyss of confusion. They're known as compulsionists, mujabbira, those who think that we are compelled in our actions. The response of the Imams is that neither of these is right. La jabra wa la tafweed. But the idea of compulsionism is wrong. The idea of delegationism is also wrong. Both of these things are true. Allah is in fact omnipotent, including over our actions, but not in the sense that He forces me to act, but rather that in the fact that He has given me full ability, full agency to act. But as I act and as I exercise my free will and as I choose to do good or to do evil, never for a second, for a moment am I free of Allah. Never am I outside of His auspices. He's always powerful. Yes, He could stop me if He wanted to. He chooses not to. In His wisdom, He's decided that He wants me to have free reign. And so He lets me choose. But the fact that I can choose, the fact that I can make that choice, the fact that I can do good and evil, it's all because Allah has given me that power. So yes, I do have free will, but yes, my free will does not limit Allah's omnipotence. So the famous statement that they repeat in response to these questions that would be posed to them when their own companions were being kind of tossed around in this debate of the day is La jabra wa la tafweed bal amrun bayna amrayn. Neither of these two extremes is correct. Rather, the matter is one between these two extremes. There's a hadith I want to share with you in which Imam Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha alayhi salam speaks about this in a way, and he quotes a hadith Qudsi. Hadith Qudsi is a quotation of a statement of Allah that's not in the Quran. Right? So it's a hadith, but the chain goes back and finally Allah is speaking. So he quotes Allah, Imam Ridha quotes Allah saying to people, O son of Adam, by my wish are you the one who wishes for yourself what you wish. Right? So you have the ability to choose, to wish, to want something, to choose an action, but by whose authority? By Allah's. By my wish are you the one who wishes for yourself what you wish. And by the ability that is from me, have you fulfilled your obligations toward me. If Allah tells you to pray and you offer that prayer, who's given you the strength to pray? Of course, Allah has given you the strength. He's given you the inspiration. He's taught you. And by the ability that is a blessing from me, have you gained the strength to disobey me. If I sin against Allah, it's not that I have somehow overpowered Allah. I have strength to disobey Him by the power that He Himself has given to me. I made you to hear, to see, to be able. This is that hidayah takwiniyah that we talked about the first lecture, where Allah gives me all those abilities within myself to be able to receive guidance, to receive those instructions, to be able to do all the things I'm meant to do. He creates me in such a way that I'm able to do all of that. So He's given me the ability to hear, to see, and to be able. Nonetheless, he says, it is true that what goodness reaches you and what good you do is from God. And what evil afflicts you and evil you do is from yourself. This is a quotation from the Quran. مَا أَصَابَكَ مِنْ حَسَنَةٍ فَمِنْ اللَّهِ وَمَا أَصَابَكَ مِنْ سَيِّئَةٍ فَمِنْ نَفْسِكَ. Right? There's some discussion about why he quotes this in asabaka min hasanatin asabaka min sayyi'atin. Here he seems to mean what you do of good and what you do of evil. So that's a little bit of a fudge factor and a bit of a ta'wil that we have to interpret to make sense of what the Imam is telling us. But what he's saying is it's true that whatever you do is by the power of Allah, that you have been able to choose that and do that. But now in terms of responsibility, who's responsible for your action? If I do good, if I do evil, am I directly responsible for that? Am I worthy of reward? Am I worthy of punishment because of that act? Because I've made the choice? What about Allah? Is He not at least partly to blame? Is He not partly responsible for my act? Because He's the one who gave me the ability. He's the one who gave me the choice. So the verse seems to say that whatever good we do, it's from Allah, and it seems to not even take into account the fact that I made the choice to do the good. Right? Whatever you do of good, it's from Allah, and then whatever you do of evil, it's from yourself. As though Allah has no role to play in my evil acts, only in my good acts. And my good acts, the verse seems to be saying, I have no role to play, it's only Allah acting. And in my evil acts, only I have a role to play, Allah has no role. Right? The Imam clarifies and he says, this is because I have a greater, actually he's quoting Allah, let me make that clear. Allah clarifies, this is because I have a greater share in your good deeds than you, and you have a greater share in your evil deeds than I. The sentence in Arabic is a nice one to remember. Ana awla bi hasanatika mink, wa anta awla bi sayyi'atika minni. All right, so the Imam, in a way, modifies the meaning of that verse. It's kind of speaking in extreme terms, and he says it's not that extreme. All your deeds are equal in the sense that Allah is the one who gave you the ability, He's the one who gave you the free will, and then He's given you the ability to choose, and now you choose to do it. In that sense, all your actions, good and bad, are equal. However, when you do good, by whose guidance, by whose inspiration, by whose encouragement have you chosen to do good? Right? Allah, of course, is the one who's given us that instruction, the hidayah tashri'iyah. He's the one who sent these prophets and role models. He's the one who's inspired us. He's the one who's done so much to pull us towards good. So when I do that good deed, while it's just like a bad deed in that Allah gave me ability and I chose to do it, I'm going with the current of the guidance Allah has placed within me in terms of my intellect, in terms of my fitrah that draws me towards Him, in terms of following all the guidance that's pulling me towards Him. Since all of that inspiration, all of that guidance comes from Him and I'm acting in response to that, really the lion's share of responsibility for that good deed goes to Allah. Yes, I made the choice, there is some virtue in it for me, and He will reward me. Not really because I'm deserving of reward, because my role is very small. In my good deed, all of the ability, all of the prerequisites for me to make the choice are from Allah. Even the ability to choose is from Allah. All the guidance and inspirations from Allah. Right, what's my role to play? I make the decision. Great, I make the decision and I do the good deed. But the lion's share of the virtue of that act is for Allah. If He does reward us out of His grace, not out of our worth. But on the other side, if I choose to exercise my free will and do something bad, here, it's not following Allah's guidance that I'm doing something bad. It's not following my fitrah and my intellect that I'm doing something bad. I'm actually going against everything that He's done for me. I'm going against the current. He's done everything to pull me away from that and forbid me from doing that evil act. Here, when I make the decision to do that evil act, the lion's basically, it's all me. I'm not doing it because of Allah's misguidance or because of Allah's guidance towards evil. I'm doing it despite all of His guidance towards good and away from evil. So here the blame, the entire blame for the evil act is on my shoulders. Yes, He had the role to play of giving me the strength, giving me the power, but that doesn't mean He's liable for my bad choice. He did everything humanly possible. Not humanly possible, everything, it's a phrase that we always use, everything possible, godly possible, everything possible to steer me away from that evil deed. The fact that I chose the evil deed is not at all to do with Him, it's only because of my choice. Of course, the choice is what He gave me, so I have to remember that. but I took the step in this direction and did this. So the fact that Allah does all of that to give us the power to choose doesn't in any way make him liable for the bad deeds that we perpetrate. We are fully responsible for the choices that we make without in any way limiting Allah, without in any way taking away from his omnipotence, his full power over everything. Right? So that hadith is related to us and our actions. Again, we can transfer it back to shaitan or any evil force, the shaitan that we know, or shayateen al-insi wal-jinn. They misguide as a factor of the agency that Allah gives them to misguide. That's what we talked about yesterday. Does that then mean that they are not liable for the evil acts that they are doing in misguiding people? Absolutely not. They are fully liable. It's fully shaitan's responsibility. He is making the choice. He has free will. He's decided that he's going to exercise that free will to not only, basically to take revenge on all of us because of our forefather Adam. And he sees Adam as the cause of his demise, because he feels like if it weren't for Adam, he was with the angels. He was set for salvation and Jannah, and it's because of Adam and the test that he was subjected to that he failed, that he fell. And so now he's sworn that all the progeny of Adam are going to kind of taste the wrath of his vengeance, and so he tries his best to misguide us. That act of misguidance by shaitan is a sin. If I misguide you, if I encourage you to do sin, if I teach you something wrong and it messes with your faith and it weakens you, that's a sin. I mean, misguiding is a sin. And so shaitan is continuously committing these sins. He is liable for them, despite the fact that the ability that he has to misguide is the ability that Allah has given him. All right? Recite one salawat. Let me give you one more example. It's a nice example that Sayyid Al-Khuwi gives in Al-Bayan, where he's also talking about the same idea of Allah's omnipotence versus our free will. And he gives the example of someone, for instance, who has a paralyzed appendage. Right? So if my arm is paralyzed, and it's perfectly healthy, the muscles are there, like everything's working, but I don't have nervous control of it. And then through electrodes or whatever, someone's able to electrify my arm and give it the power that it needs. So now I can use my brain to control my arm, not because I have my own power over my arm, but because this electricity is being sent into my arm. Right? So in this case, if I'm able to move this arm and I go and I hit someone with injustice, right? Or I go and I help someone with that arm. The choice that I'm making to hurt or to help, to do evil or to do good, is fully my choice. I'm fully liable. It doesn't make sense to say that it's the electricity's fault for this injustice that I've committed. Or it's the medical technician or whoever's caused that ability to come into my arm. It's his fault or her fault that I hurt this person or helped this person. The liability, the culpability for the deed is fully mine, even though the ability to do the action and to make the choice came from from another agency. Right? All right. So with that understanding, hopefully understanding, let's move on to speak about shaitan himself, because that's how we're kind of preparing ourselves to understand shaitan's role as a cause of misguidance. And this is something that's really important to understand, primarily because he is extremely influential, but his influence is so subtle. He influences us in ways that are powerful, but we don't even recognize that it's he who is putting those thoughts in our mind. So I've collected some of the verses in the Quran that talk about shaitan and how he works and what he does. And I want to share some reflections on these verses and see if we can come away with an understanding of what he does, and then also what we can do to resist and to repel his influence. So the first verse, Surah Al-Isra, verse number 63. This is in the conversation between Allah and Iblis after Iblis is cast out. Allah says, اذهب فمن تبعك منهم فإن جهنم جزاؤكم جزاء موفورا. All right, so he tells Iblis to get out. He was in the garden, same garden that Adam and Eve were in. He's cast out because of his rebellion. And Allah says, anyone who follows you, and you, of course, yourself, all of you will be put into hellfire, and this will be a just punishment. It will be what you deserve. So the key here is that Shaitan has no influence over us unless we ourselves take the step to follow him. So while he is a formidable adversary, while he is powerful in a way, and he has great influence, his influence is contingent upon us opening ourselves up to him. So if we are tabi', if we are followers of Shaitan, if we open ourselves up to him, if we listen to those insinuations, when those thoughts come into our mind, if we give them heed and follow them, now we're kind of opening ourselves up to that disease of satanic influence. But if I can resist, if I can get those insinuations and recognize them as evil, put them out of my mind, insist on doing the right thing, insist on resisting, then I'm not susceptible to his insinuation. He has no power over me. One of the things that he does to us is he makes us ungrateful. The verse says, ثُمَّ لَآتِيَنَّهُم مِّن بَيْنِ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمِنْ خَلْفِهِمْ وَعَنْ أَيْمَانِهِمْ وَعَنْ شَمَائِلِهِمْ وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ. All right, so the two aspects of this verse I want to speak about. One is he himself, Shaitan is speaking. He says that I'm going to come at the children of Adam from all sides, right? From in front of them, from behind them, from the right, from the left. I think of, when I read this verse, I think of like a boxer, right? Who's constantly in danger, all sides of his. He has to be on the defense, not only from the front, but the punches can come from all sides. And if for a second, if he is really good at blocking low cuts, uppercuts, then that's fine. But then he's susceptible from all these other sides. His face is exposed. If he blocks one side, then his other side's exposed. If he puts his hands up, then his underside's exposed. Right? So if he's not careful, if he only defends himself from one aspect, then he opens himself up to so many other aspects, and he becomes weak and exposes himself, right? So Shaitan's offensive against us is like that. We should never feel that we're safe, because he himself is a sworn enemy, and he knows he can access us from so many different ways. It could be thoughts that come directly into our head. It could be thoughts that come to us through other people who are influential around us, through loved ones, through people that we look up to. It could be from exposure to ideas that are corrosive to our faith, that are tempting away from virtuousness towards sin. And there's so many different avenues that he has, and he's not going to stop until he's exploited every one of those avenues to try to misguide us. But then he says that I'm going to come at them from all these different directions, and then he tells Allah, وَلَا تَجِدُ أَكْثَرَهُمْ شَاكِرِينَ. The result of my offensive against them is that you're going to find them, most of them, to be ungrateful. Right? So ingratitude may not seem like, at first, it may not seem like the worst sin. Right? If you think of a bad sin, you think of murder and dhulm and those kinds of big things. But if you think about it, the blessings of Allah are innumerable. Every single aspect of what we have is a blessing of Allah. When we think of gratitude, we shouldn't just think of saying thank you. Right? Shukran lillah, for instance, to Allah, or saying thank you. Verbal thanks it's a necessary formality. But that's not the extent of our gratitude. The more important forms of gratitude are actually using the blessings that have been given to you in a way that pleases the one who's given them. Right? If I give you a gift, and then you say, thank you very much, and then as soon as I turn around, you toss it to the side and say, who cares? I could care less about that. You've done the formality of thanking me, but now you haven't appreciated what I've given you. Or I give you something valuable, something I've made with my own hands, and you assume that it's something kind of manufactured, made in China, and that sort of a thing, and you discount it, or you use it for a purpose that's not in keeping with what I intended. I thought it would be something beautiful that you would beautify your house with, and here you put it in front of the front door and you wipe your feet on it as you walk in. Right? That's what we're doing when we're ungrateful to Allah. When we sin against Allah, we're using the strength that He's given us, the knowledge that He's given us, the blessings that He's given us, and then we're taking them and we're throwing them at the front door and walking over them. Even if we're saying shukran lillah, shukran lillah, shukran lillah ad nauseum, but the reality is that we're not appreciating. In fact, we're biting the hand that feeds us. He's given us something for a purpose, and now I'm throwing it in His face. I'm misusing it. I'm exploiting it. I'm wasting it. Right? So these practical forms of ingratitude are truly heinous crimes. And this is one of the goals of shaitan, to make us ungrateful for what Allah has given. And if we are ungrateful, then we cut ourselves off. Right? What does Allah say? لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ وَلَإِن كَفَرْتُمْ إِنَّ عَذَابِي لَشَدِيدٌ. So the way He works, if the more grateful we are for the blessings He gives us, the more He increases those blessings. But if we are ungrateful, He doesn't even kind of put in words what the consequence is. Right? If you're ungrateful, there's painful punishment. He doesn't say that part, but he just mentions that my punishment is severe. Right? And so we don't want to subject ourselves to that, but that's what shaitan's goal is. Another of shaitan's roles, what he does tazyeen, as we talked about the last couple of days. He gilds and makes evil deeds seem favorable. Again, he speaks to Allah in that same exchange. He says, "Rabbi bima aghwaytani la uzayyinanna lahum fil ard wa la ughwiyannahum ajma'in." And he's putting the blame for his own misguidance, which he himself chose. He passes the buck, and he's trying to say that Allah, it's your fault. Bima aghwaytani, because you misguided me. Right? We talked that that's not actually true. Actually, he's responsible for his own action. Allah simply subjected him to the test, a test that he was fully capable of succeeding in. He's the one who chose to fail in the test. But he doesn't recognize that. Sometimes, we take a test, we fail, and we blame it on the teacher. We blame it on other circumstances outside of ourselves instead of taking responsibility ourselves. That's what Iblis does. It's not my fault that I failed the test. It's your fault, Allah. He says, "Bima aghwaytani," because you misguided me. And of course, because the means through which you tested me was this Adam and Eve, who are now going to have progeny, I'm going to make sure to misguide every last one of them. Right? لَأُزَيِّنَنَّ لَهُمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. I'm going to beautify things in the dunya for them, and I'm going to, in that way, misguide every last one of them. Right? So this is one of the primary tasks of Iblis, of shaitan. When our sensibilities are intact, when we understand what's good and what's bad, then we have hope. We can make the right choices because we have the right sensitivity. We understand that there's good in this action. There's evil in this action. If I do good, there are certain good consequences. If I do evil, it's a sin and there's punishment and these kinds of things. At least my standards are intact. I might fail. I might accidentally, in a passion, do something bad, but at least I recognize that it's bad. But one of the things that shaitan does is he messes with my sensitivity, where I now start to justify a bad act that I've done. I start to find ways to make myself okay with the mistake. Instead of repenting, instead of fixing it, instead of admitting that I'm wrong, I start to say, well, some people might say it's wrong, but that's based on interpretation, and here are my justifications, and actually I was right, and I should have done it like this, and look at all the circumstances, and you come up with all sorts of justifications and rationalizations for it, and it starts to seem like not such a bad thing after all. And then next time the same challenge comes about, we have all of our rationalizations in place, and we make the justification right off the bat. We don't even bother trying to resist. We make the same mistake again, and we have all of our justifications in place, and we no longer even see that thing as something bad. Right? So this is one of the important works of shaitan that we have to be aware of and then be able to resist. In another verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, he tells us, "Ash-shaytanu ya'idukum al-faqr wa ya'murukum bil-fahsha." He promises you poverty and he enjoins you to indecency. The poverty is something important because so much of what we have to do is we have dunya in our hands, we have wealth in our hands, and so much of our duties revolve around using this wealth in the right way. Not only for charity, that's one thing, but even supporting our families, supporting ourselves, making sure that those who are dependent on us are able to live a dignified life. This requires spending, parting with wealth. Charity, of course, also requires parting with wealth. We have required forms of charity in zakah and khums. One of the things that shaitan does is he puts into our mind that you work so hard for this. Right? You sacrificed your time and your effort to earn all this money, and this poor person, for instance, is lazy. This poor person, he never worked for anything. Why should you have to give up your hard-earned money for this person? If you give everything you have, then you'll be out of capital. Your family will have to suffer. Who knows if today you have extra money, maybe tomorrow something will happen and you'll lose it all. You need to make sure you hoard for yourself and keep for yourself for a rainy day. And so you'll put all of these thoughts in your mind to threaten you with poverty if you are to spend on your family, with poverty if you are to give to the poor and give to those who need and give to causes that are worthy. Right? And so that's one of the important ways that he tries to dissuade us from good action. And he encourages us to do indecent acts. Right? So he exposes us. We're already naturally attracted. That's part of our creation, is we're naturally attracted. We'll speak about this aspect of the nafs and its attraction to the dunya. And so all he has to do is expose us. When our guard is down, when we're a little bit tired, just whenever our guard is down, he exposes us to an advertisement. He exposes us to some sort of an image, to some sort of an idea, to some sounds and music and different kinds of things. If we're exposed when our guard is down, that might be enough to hook us. And once we're hooked, then it's a slippery slope that we can easily slide down towards committing sin. And it seems very easy. We can sometimes justify that and say, I'm tired, or I'm usually good. One act of sin, who's gonna hold me accountable for that? And we come up with all sorts of justifications for committing that sin. All of these are part of shaitan's tricks and his insinuations that he puts in our mind. Another thing that he does is he encourages us to be wasteful. إِنَّ الْمُبَذِّرِينَ كَانُوا إِخْوَانَ الشَّيَاطِينَ. Wastefulness, these two words, tabdhir and israf, and our commentators have an interesting distinction between the two. Tabdhir comes from badhr, which is the seeds that you sow. And so if you broadcast your seed, throw it like this over the ground, some of them will take, a lot of them will be wasted. That action of tabdhir, of broadcasting, where so much is wasted and only some are fruitful, that's a kind of wastefulness. Whereas israf is an excess, where I spend too much. It might only be in one instance where I'm spending, or one instance where I'm using or misusing some resource, but I'm giving more or spending more than what is due. In either case, wastefulness is one of the things that is a characteristic of shaitan and something that he wants us to do. It's really a kind of ingratitude. We went back to the idea of being ungrateful for the blessings. If I'm misappropriating the resources that Allah has given me by putting it in places where it's going to be lost, wasting it here and there, then that's showing that I don't actually value the resource Allah has given me. And I'm not using it in a way that's pleasing to Him. Instead of being careful and spendthrift, I end up wasting what He's given me. Another verse in Surah Al-Isra tells us, وَاسْتَفْزِزْ مَنِ اسْتَطَعْتَ مِنْهُمْ. This is a challenge that Allah is giving shaitan. So as He's kicking him out from the garden and telling him to go to the dunya and all of this, He issues a challenge to shaitan. And He says the following, وَاسْتَفْزِزْ مَنِ اسْتَطَعْتَ مِنْهُمْ بِصَوْتِكَ وَأَجْلِبْ عَلَيْهِمْ بِخَيْلِكَ وَرَجِلِكَ وَشَارِكْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَوْلَادِ وَعِدْهُمْ وَمَا يَعِدُهُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ إِلَّا غُرُورًا. He says, call them, recruit them, meaning us. Iblis, shaitan, try to recruit them with your voice, with all the means that you have at your disposal. وَأَجْلِبْ عَلَيْهِمْ بِخَيْلِكَ وَرَجْلِكَ. Our commentators say khayl and rajl are talking about the cavalry of an army and the infantry. Right? The cavalry, horse-mounted soldiers, and infantry, the others who are walking on foot. So Allah is telling Iblis that you have all of these means at your disposal. You have very rapid and quick means where you can attack like a cavalry. You have slower means like foot soldiers that have to kind of take a slower route and maybe a circuitous route. You have all these different means at your disposal. I challenge you, use all of them. وَشَارِكْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَوْلَادِ. Become partners with them, with the people, in their wealth and in their children. And this is a little bit challenging to understand. So how does he become a partner in our wealth and in our children? So think of how what all we do with our wealth. We earn it for one thing, then we spend it, we use it. In our earning, if shaitan is successful in putting ideas into our mind where we start to earn in ways that are illegal, we start to disregard the requirements that Allah has put, the red lines that He has laid down. And we start to justify in the same way. We start to come up with all sorts of reasons with His help for why this is justified. That, for instance, I know that this particular line of work, finance and banking, for instance, I'm going to be dealing with interest. I'm going to be party to interest-based transactions. But what am I to do? I have all this training. There's good money in it. I need to raise my kids. I need to have enough money to live in a respectable way. This is the best way I can do it. Yes, I have to deal with haram here and there, maybe even on a daily basis, but what's the big, I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. And so we come up with justifications to justify a haram kind of work. And so then the earning from that work becomes earning that in which shaitan is your partner. Yes, you've done the work, but he's also done his work in justifying and in facilitating and helping you and encouraging you along the way. And so the earnings from that work, it's actually a shared earning between you and shaitan. He's your sharik. Or once you earn your money and then you think about spending it and how to use it, there also he can come in and he can encourage you to spend your money in haram ways, that you've worked hard for it, it's yours. No one else has the right to tell you what to do with it. And you should enjoy it. Or like I mentioned before, you have obligations on your money in terms of zakah and khoms, for instance, but he just tells you that no, you worked hard for it. And what right does that poor person have? The poor sadat, who is the marja' taqlid to tell you where you should spend your khoms? You earned it, it's your money, you have the right to decide. And so you come up with all these justifications to either keep your money and not spend it in the way that's required of you, or to spend it in ways that are haram. And in all of this, shaitan is succeeding. If I listen to him, he's succeeding in becoming a partner in my wealth. He's become a partner in receiving it, or he's becoming a partner in helping me to decide how I should spend it. And with our children the same way. I think of the sinful ways that you could have children, the sinful ways you could raise children. Right? There's so many aspects to child rearing and child having that where shaitan could have a role in influencing you. And if he does, then he becomes a partner in that child, and he becomes almost like a third parent for that child, and that child also becomes a product of satanic influences and satanic forces. The way shaitan works is something that we should pay attention to. So I've been talking about whispering and insinuation. This idea of waswasa. In Surah An-Nas, we have the verse, min sharril waswasil khannas. Waswas is this entity that comes and whispers something, but then slithers away. Right? So he doesn't even take responsibility for what he's done. He doesn't stick around for the consequences. All he has to do is put the idea in your mind, and then he goes. we don't have much time to wrap this up. Let me wrap this up with one idea, and then maybe we can touch a little bit more on some of the more details in the coming lecture. Shaitan's influence over us is through insinuation, through influencing our thoughts and our emotions. Right? Hearing all of this, it might become kind of scary. You feel like, if he has so much power, then what are we supposed to do? How do I know what thoughts are his and what thoughts are good and these sorts of things? His power is, he has no power over us in terms of making us do something, affecting our physical well-being, even affecting our spiritual well-being. All he can do is put ideas in our mind, and the way he works, he puts ideas in our mind where we ourselves don't even realize that it's an external force that's coming in. For us, it just seems like, thoughts just pop into your head. You're doing something, or you're bored, and an idea comes in that, why don't you do this? Why don't you look at this? Why don't you look at this website? Why don't you do this activity? And ideas just come to us, a kind of inspiration, usually inspiration for something positive, or insinuations from shaitan. So we don't even realize what the source is, but we're told, Allah gives us an insight into this, that what's happening is that the evil insinuations, the instigations to do something wrong, are things that shaitan is putting in your mind. How do we resist this? Allah Himself says, فَإِمَّا يَنزَغَنَّكَ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ نَزْغٌ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ إِنَّهُ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ, for instance. There are a couple of verses with different wording. Right, so whenever shaitan instigates, whenever he comes in and he provokes you, then the way to save yourself from that is to seek protection from Allah. Right, so he doesn't have power over us unless we follow him, unless we open ourselves up to him. When we listen to him, that's when he has power over us. As long as I ignore him, as long as I turn away from him, then he has no power over me. So we have to come back to Allah, strengthen our connection to him, simply ask him. Say, we have this formula, this phrase, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. That's a phrase that we're supposed to invoke whenever we're in these situations and we feel like there's an influence over us that's negative. But it's not a magical formula. It's not a spell that we just say and then we leave ourselves in the same situation. We don't change anything about what we're doing. Du'as only work if we back the du'a up with action. I pray to Allah to give me refuge from shaitan, then I need to do something to change my circumstance. If I was about to speak angrily to someone, I need to get out of that situation, relieve myself from that situation so that I can calm myself down and not say something, not lash out, not react in a way that's going to lead to some sort of a sin. If I'm being tempted into some sort of haram, I can't simply say "A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim" and continue to engage and continue to be in that situation where haram is tempting me. Say the dua, but then remove yourself and act in a way where you're practically and actively doing something to relieve yourself and remove yourself from that situation. So inshallah, tomorrow we'll be able to speak a little bit more about the way shaitan acts and some of the ways to resist his temptation. But today we were able to understand some of the kinds of influence he has over us, some of the ways that he is able to come at us, and also in a general sense, the key to resisting that, which is to hold fast to the rope of Allah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.